This is the story how over 1200 years Russian went from this to this. And by the end of it, we'll have the answer to why does Russian look like that? Alright, our story starts in 862 AD in Great Moravia, which is modern-day Czech Republic, Slovakia, parts of Hungary, Poland, and Austria. Great Moravia is basically the spark that starts this entire story I'm about to tell you. And the kingdom was doing pretty good. They had money, they had good trade routes, they're being led by the specific character Prince Radoslav. But they had a big issue. To the west, they had the Franks, who were militaristic, aggressive, and wanted to expand eastward into Moravia. And you had the Bulgarians and the Byzantine Empire to the southeast, which were the ancient superpowers. And contrary to what modern people may believe, they weren't worried about soldiers or siege equipment coming into the region. They wouldn't do that first. That's not what people did first. What they were worried was the priests. You may be thinking, what do priests have to do with this? They're not very scary guys, depending on who you're talking to. Priests didn't speak their language, and they would literally just do the entire liturgy in Latin, which was considered the holy language. And we'll get into that later. But the Slavic people were illiterate and had no written alphabet at this time. And Latin was a completely foreign noise. They couldn't understand prayers, the scripture readings, the rituals. But I think it's kind of weird, and it's hard to learn more about Christianity in that situation. One thing you have to understand about this period is the church and state were really intertwined. Whoever had control over the churches, every village, every city, every town has a church. And in those churches were clergymen who answered to the bishops, answered to the archbishops, answered to the popes. And in this case, Moravia's pagan. They don't have any power within the church. And so all of that power was coming from essentially foreign agents who were acting on behalf of the archbishop in Salzburg. Radoslav knew that this was going to be a bad situation. He knew nations who didn't have a written language could easily be erased by those who did. All the Franks had to do was write in Latin that the Slavs had ligma. How would they know? They can't read or write. And so Radoslav came up with a pretty good idea. And basically the only idea that you can really have in this situation was if the people wanted to break the Franks' control on the country, he'd have to fix this Latin issue. People cannot pray, cannot connect with God without Latin. And if they had their own language, then it cuts out this middleman. Now, a really big part of this, he needed the Slavic church to have its own identity, so he went southeast and sent a message.
Our people have rejected paganism, but we have no teacher who can explain to us in our own language. Send us such experts.
And the emperor did, and he actually knew the perfect guys for the job. So who ended up doing it was Constantine and his older brother Methodius. These were the guys because not only were they sons of high-ranking officials, they were from a Greek city, Thessaloniki, a city that had Slavic speakers, and they knew the dialect very well. So they were definitely the guys for the job. In addition, Constantine was a brilliant linguist. I mean, working back then at a high level, you'd have to know multiple languages. And his older brother, Methodius, he was a monk, but previously worked as a governor. So he was really there to manage from a high level what Constantine was going to do. And I'm sure to keep his brother safe. So they were tasked with the job of creating alphabet for the Slavs to get their Bible in. They didn't have one yet. They were using Latin, and they didn't understand it. Like anyone would, they tried using their own language. They tried using Greek. The Bible was already taught in Greek. They were from a Greek city. They know Greek, but they ran into an issue where the Slavs' language is too different for the sounds of their alphabet to represent. So what Constantine did, this would be a little bit fringe, but he retreated into prayer and solitude and engineered a new alphabet from scratch. He came out with a super geometric script full of circles and crosses. It was basically a holy language designed to be visually distinct from Latin or Greek. And we got what is known as Glagolitic. Armed with this new alphabet and the translated scriptures, the brothers arrived in Moravia in 863 AD. And for the first time, the peasants and the lay people of the Slavic lands heard the Bible in liturgy in the words they used every day. And I'm pretty weird. I'm sure that was pretty weird. But the Frank clergymen were super pissed by this, just like how Ratislav was pissed by it for the same reason they were. They saw it as an attack on their authority, as they probably should have. And so what they did is they attacked the two brothers with the trilingual dogma. Now this was a very common belief. The actual reason why they were only speaking in Greek, they said the trilingual dogma as the argument, and it's that God could only be worshipped in three languages that were inscribed in the cross: Hebrew, Greek, or Latin. And this is a pretty big deal. Whenever you're getting caught up by the church, that's essentially like getting an FBI indictment. They got held up in religious court. They had to go to Venice, and he had to defend it. They had a pretty dramatic debate in Venice. Facing a hostile council of Latin bishops, Constantine actually defended the right of the people of their culture, with a quote supposedly saying this:
"Does not rain fall on all equally? Does not the sun shine on all? Do you not breathe the air just as we do? How are you not ashamed to recognize only three languages and decide that all other nations and races should be blind and deaf?"
And with that, he won the epic rap battle of history of that time and gained the blessing of the Pope. So no one can really say anything at that point. But this victory did not end the way he wanted. I'm sure traveling that far to going to Venice, exhausted by the struggle, the stresses of potentially being excommunicated, or who knows what would happen, He fell ill in Rome, and on his deathbed, just like his brother, he took a monastic name of Cyril and died in 869 AD at the age of 42. He left his brother in charge and left him with these dying words:
"We were a pair of oxen plowing the same furrow. Do not give up the work."
So Methodius tried to hold the line. He returned to Moravia, but by that point, the political winds have shifted. The Franks arrested him, beat him, and threw him into an open-air dungeon in Swabia, where he sat there and rotted for 2.5 years. And although he was released at some point, and he continued to preach until 885 AD when he died, the mission of Moravia was really doomed. Right after his death, Franks expelled the disciples, the Slavic books were burned, and the scholars were sold into slavery or chased out of the country. And it looked like the end of the Slavs having a written language. But unfortunately for the Franks, the Slavs don't give up that easily. So the surviving disciples who made it out, some names that were mentioned in the literature are Clement and Nam. And many men like them fled south. They crossed the river into the Bulgarian Empire that I mentioned earlier, the safe zone, southeastern safe zone. And the Bulgarian Tsar, Boris I, welcomed with open arms because he knew exactly what Rostislav was talking about and what he had seen years before. A chance for cultural independence from Byzantium, and he gave the disciples refugee and resources to start a literary school. He completely understood where he was coming from on that angle of independence and safety from the church/state. It's kind of the same thing, right? So in Bulgaria, the disciples faced the issue of the Glagolitic script was beautiful. I mean, look at this shit. It looks like Lord of the Rings Elven script. I mean, that shit could be on the One Ring when written in cursive. It was hard to write and learn. I mean, it's too complex for mass adoption. So they had to make a rational decision. If they want more people to be writing these books, I mean, we need more Bibles, boys, but you're doing too much with it. What they did is they took the standard Greek alphabet, which was widely known, kept the Greek letters for sounds that matched, and then they imported modified versions of Constantine Glagolitic's letters for the unique Slavic sounds. And they named this new hybrid alphabet Cyrillic, in honor of our buddy from before Constantine, which his monastic name was Cyril, in honor of their beloved teacher who had started it all. And I think Constantine, if he had seen the decision at the time, would agree that God does speak Slavic. It was Cyrillic that was born from the ashes of a failed mission, meaning the Constantine and Methodius mission, and refined in the safety of Bulgaria. From there, it spread north to Russia, where it survived for centuries. So there is a bit of an issue. So for the next 700 years, the alphabet went through a bit of a freeze. So the original Cyrillic was geometric and neat in a style called
Ustav.
But as monks wrote faster and faster, you can imagine, these guys had a lot of time. They're writing faster and faster. The letters melt. They become rounder, messier, full of loops. And this new style, which is from the monks who are trying to write fast, sometimes they have time, they make it real intricate. It's called
Skoropis,
which is literally just fast writing, like cursive, really. So by the 1600s, there was a massive disconnect. The letters people wrote by hand looked nothing like the letters that they're going to see in the Bible or anything else. When Ivan Fyodorov brought the printing press to Russia in 1564, he didn't fix it. He was just printing religious books. So he was trying to copy the style that was already there, this, old, ornate, difficult handwriting. That this handwriting was already in the religious book, so he was trying to copy it. It adds a bit of legitimacy to his machine if it can, mimic these really complicated handwriting styles. So he accidentally froze this complicated, archaic look that was made really just for monks to flex on people, like a calligraphy girl on TikTok or something, or like those Chinese guys who do paintings of words with the big brush. You guys know what I'm fucking talking about. Anyway, he actually froze the language by doing this because it's on the printing press. Stuff's going to be printed, and you don't just bring a machine for nothing. So that meant for the next 150 years, reading a Russian book felt like, I don't know, deciphering the One Ring or something. And so even if the book was brand new, it looked ancient. It takes a bit of a big force to fix this once the momentum's going. And it just so happens a guy like that did come along. Okay, so the next part of the story, it's 1708. You gotta think. People got ships. People be on the water. They're getting their sea legs, And Peter the Great is obsessed with the West, specifically the Netherlands. And so Peter had spent time in Amsterdam, working in the shipyards. Why he was doing that, I don't know. Maybe undercover. And he loved the Dutch efficiency. Dutch, they got these badass ships, and the literal manual for any shipbuilding was in Dutch. They had the printing press, and this guy is Peter the Great, right? Peter the Great's gonna know how to speak Dutch, and he's reading those documents. He's gonna read the manuals, and he just realized, he's like, wow, it's just so easy. It's regulated. The script is just so evenly spaced. It has correct kerning. Yeah, I dropped that word in there. And he wasn't just being like a fanboy, glazing them hard. Peter wanted Russia to build ships and win wars, just the Dutch were. And the best technical manuals in the world were printed in Amsterdam using this clean, blocky font, easy to read. You gotta think, they have this script that literally they're printing in cursive, and you see how that goes in America, so you don't want that. And he wanted his people to be able to read Russian manuals at the same speed and clarity. They had to take it a little slower. Peter realized that if Russia was going to be a modern scientific power, it could not be stuck using a font designed for monks, or at least replicating monks. So he acted, and he sat down, he took the alphabet, and personally crossed out the ugly churchy letters. The ones that did not pass the vibe check, the ones that were doing too much, and he forced Russian shapes to conform to Roman typography so that he can be on the same level as the Dutch. And if you don't believe me, check out these pictures. So he straightened the curves, he added serifs, which were these little lines at the bottom. He made it symmetrical. He was intentionally trying to replicate that clean Dutch look so he could print naval manuals and scientific papers and food reviews on Yelp or something. Who the fuck knows? But at the end, you get this very civil script. It looks like English, and this is actually what answers my original question. This is what does it. It looks like English, but not quite, because the Slavic language was forced into a Dutch costume so they could print shit. And even after Peter's cleanup, the language was still hoarding letters it didn't need. Okay, it's been a while. It has been a while, but just like language does, it evolves with people, and there was a big evolution in the Russian people in 1918, the Bolshevik purge. So if you're Gen Z like me, you've probably heard the name Lenin, but you don't know he started a group called the Bolsheviks, which was a bigger movement in Russia, and it literally just means the majority. So Lenin's goal was to turn a nation of basically people who couldn't read or right the really poor into a modern communist superpower, and he was trying to do it really freaking quickly. And I don't know about you, that it usually does not end well. And there was a problem. So the Russian language, it was still pretty bloated. You know, they had fixed some of the regulationary issues so they could print it, but you know, these guys, these Bolsheviks, they were really worried about efficiency. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the communists at this time were really focused on efficiency. So in 1917, the hard sign, this is this specific sign in Russian, at the end of words was completely useless. It did not serve a purpose. It didn't change pronunciation. It didn't change the meaning. It was just a stopper you had to write at the end of almost every noun. It was ink literally wasted on, I guess, tradition, right? And we don't really have something like this. I mean, I guess you could think of the word catalog or program. In British English, that's spelled with a G-U-E, and we got rid of that, and it has the extra M-M-E at the end, and we got rid of that in American English because it's a vestigial limb. It's not needed, but it did nothing but take up space. So when the Bolsheviks seized power, they didn't just change the government, and you know, there's a lot that comes with that. I'm not going to touch on that because this is a language video, but they wanted to change the vibe. They banned several letters to simplify literacy, and more importantly, they needed to save that cheddar. Okay, so it's estimated that by banning one silent letter, that hard sign, at the end of the words, they saved 8% of all of the paper in Russia. Yeah, I want you to imagine, you're printing, what, a 400-page manifesto and realizing 32 of those pages are just silent letters? No. Whenever nobody has fucking food and you're waiting in lines for shit, you don't want to be wasting paper on some bullshit like that. So they decided, hey, we're not going to ask nicely. This is a bit of an issue, right? And so sailors, Red Guards, they literally just went into the printing shops and confiscated the metal blocks for the banned letters, which, I'll be honest, back then, you got to think, that's pretty nice that it was that easy. I mean, all you got to do, you don't got to kill nobody. You don't have to shoot anybody in the head. You don't have to get someone to kill themselves in prison. You just take away the letters. It's like, yeah, well, there's only one way to print things. You got these letters. So they took them away, and they said if you wanted to print the old way, you were basically an enemy of the state. And this gave Russian its final form, a modern, utilitarian, blocky aesthetic. And it looks weird to English eyes because it's basically a battle scar of history. It's a Frankenstein monster of all these different saints, emperors, rebels. So why does Russian look like that? Because history forced it to. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed that video and you want to see more like it, consider subscribing on Patreon.